It's such an honor to be with you this morning, and I really mean that. There's no other group that I'd rather speak to, and I really mean that as well. And Gail, thank you for what you do and the other leaders. You have been in this fight to protect and preserve the heart and soul of this nation for generations now. And the inspiration and the leadership that you and others have shown have changed and shaped this nation and this state. Thank you for doing that, and thank you for letting me participate in that as well. I got to tell you, I'm a little behind today. I'm not as prepared as I would otherwise like to be. It was a busy week in Congress. We did some good things early in the week that I want to share with you in a little bit. My wife had surgery on Wednesday, and I wanted to be with her on Wednesday, and I planned to be with her, and I couldn't. And that kind of tore my heart out, honestly, to know that my daughter was taking her to the hospital instead of me. And I got home as quickly as I could, but I've been trying to spend time with her and help her now. And I got up this morning, and I thought, oh my gosh, I got this talk here, and I haven't really prepared like I would like to. But I hope if I come across that way, hopefully I can fake it enough that you don't notice. And I actually brought some PowerPoint slides, so that's going to help me keep on track as well. I want to review some of the things we've done in the first term, and then more importantly, look at what we're going to do in the next 2 years. Because the last 2 years to me, as you know, I've only been in Congress for 2 years, the last 2 years have been, the word escapes me. The best word I can come up with is interesting. And that's not the best description. It's been humbling. It's been in many ways frustrating. There's been times I got on the airplane on a Friday to come home, and I would bang my head against the side of the wall of the aircraft going, what have we done? What have we done to help the American people, and are we going to be able to do what we need to do to save this country? And people would ask me all the time, you know, Chris, what do you think? You know, you've been there for a while now. What do you think? What's it like? And honestly, I'm not sure anyone can be prepared for working in this environment. I really don't. And my career in the military as a business owner, as a writer, I think it prepared me as well as it could have prepared anyone, but I still didn't feel prepared. There's this great story that Benjamin Franklin tells. He wrote it in his journal, and then he referred to it many times in his speaking. I'm going to quote it, so you'll forgive me on one part, it's a little impolite. But he said, there was a mouse that lived in a tavern. And one night this mouse found a barrel of ale that had a leak. So the mouse drank and drank and drank and drank until he could drink no more. Then he stood up and he kind of pulled on his whiskers and he looked around and he said, now, where's that damn cat? And that's kind of the way I felt when I went to Congress. I thought, you know, okay, show me that cat. But it turned out I was just a little mouse. And we're all just little mice. But taken together, all of us can take that cat. I really believe that. I know that you believe that. Because if you didn't believe that, you wouldn't be here this morning. And thank you for all of you, for your continued faith, your continued fear, and appropriate amount of concern for the future of our nation. I'm going to begin and end with a quote from Abraham Lincoln. I mentioned that in many ways I felt humbled by this experience. Abraham Lincoln said, and all of you have heard this quote before, he said, I have been driven to my knees on many occasions by the conviction that I had nowhere else to go. And that certainly has been the case with me. It was my great privilege to serve our country for 14 years as a pilot in the Air Force. It is my great honor. It is the same honor to serve my country now and to serve you as a member of Congress. In some ways, we have made progress, and I'm going to share some of that with you. But our nation is in trouble, and we have so much work that we have to do. So let me go through a couple ideas, if we could, and show you first some good news, because there is some good news, and I think we should recognize it. Thank you. Okay, first slide. Memorize this quickly. There's going to be a test at the end of the presentation. Okay, that's an obnoxious slide. I get that. There's a couple things there that are worth pointing out to you, though. If you look at the third column, discretionary spending there, and if you go down to 2010, which was the height of Democratic power, a Democratic Senate and House at the end of that, and a Democratic president, $1,440 billion in discretionary spending. Completely unsustainable. But look at the numbers underneath that. 1.4 trillion, 1.3, 1.2, 1.1. For the first time since the Korean War, for 3 years in a row, we have actually cut the amount of discretionary spending. We didn't fake it like some people say, well, what you did was you decreased the amount of increase. Because that's what they would do for years. They'd say, oh, yeah, we cut spending, and they didn't cut spending at all. All they did was not spend as much as they thought that they were going to spend. That didn't happen here. With the Republican Congress, and thank heaven for the Republican House of Representatives over the last few years, with the Republican Congress, we actually cut the amount of discretionary spending. And then go over to the last column. Now, this one is laughingly labeled surplus/deficit. Surplus, right. That's funny, isn't it? Like the government's ever going to actually have a surplus. Well, we did for a few years in the late 90s. And we can, again, as Senator Lee so eloquently said about that battle for a balanced budget amendment. And by the way, this is, as I said, and I've said this 1,000 times, we commit national suicide with our spending and our debt. As a former military officer, I understand the international threat, but that isn't the thing that keeps me awake at night. The thing that keeps me awake is what we do to ourselves. And this number there, that $1.5 trillion annual deficit that happened in 2009 and 2010, that was primarily the thing that drove me to run for office. But again, if you look at that last column of our deficit, $1.5 trillion at the worst under President Obama. But if you look at last year, $483 billion. Now that's an unacceptable number by any measure, but it is a boatload better than the $1.5 trillion. We are making progress, and there's only one reason that we are making progress. It is not because of President Obama. It is not because of Nancy Pelosi. It is not because of Harry Reid. It is because of the Republicans in the House of Representatives holding the line on spending, and thank heaven that we have the Republican House so that we can begin to make some progress on this really critical issue. All right, a couple other things that are worth mentioning, successes over the last few years. And there's really a long list here that we could take a few minutes. I will go through them very quickly. Discretionary spending, we just talked about. Substantial cuts to the EPA. Holy cow, is that a good one. And honestly, I hope that we're just getting started on cutting the EPA, because they've got waters of the U.S., they've got carbon emissions, they've got all sorts of regulations that are coming down the pike still that will put the boot on the throat of American business, an American free enterprise. And I just frankly don't think we can cut the EPA enough as long as they have the agenda that they do. Substantial cuts to the IRS, everyone's favorite government agency, right? And it is terrifying to think that this administration polarized and politicized an agency like the IRS. That's the kind of thing that would happen in Germany at the height of fascism. It does not happen in the United States, and they should be held accountable. And I don't understand still why Lois Lerner is walking around free instead of sitting somewhere accounting to Congress for what she has done to that agency with others working with her. We use the appropriation process to get things done that could not have been done otherwise. I tell you, it's a great time to be on the appropriations process. For example, on the Appropriations Committee, we were able to insert language that forbid the administration from listing the sage grouse on endangered species. That is enormously important. If the sage grouse were listed, we shut down economic and oil and gas and energy development through almost the entire Midwestern states. We stopped them from doing that because we included it in a rider on the appropriations, and I'm so glad we were able to do that. If any of you are shooters like I am, hunters and shooters, there were things with ammunition. There's things with them trying to regulate farm ponds and farm irrigation streams, growing up on a farm like I did. And to think that the EPA is going to come in and regulate the ditch that we would have that goes from one field to another. But that's exactly what they were proposing to do, and we were able to stop them from doing that. There are others. Now look, trust me on this. I'm not here to tell you that things are all great. I'm not here to tell you that, you know, we've won this battle and we can go home and just celebrate. Not at all. But I am here to tell you and to share with you that there are some things that we've done, that the Republicans have done, that we should be grateful for. And that we have had some success in making inroads to cutting back the power of the federal government. Now let's look ahead and see the great challenges that we have before us, because this battle is just barely getting started. But in the first 2 weeks of this Congress, which is really, 8 days of work, something like that, this is what the Republicans in the House have done. We defunded the president's executive amnesty, which I think is the most important piece of legislation we may take up in this entire Congress. This is a generational battle. This isn't a fight over a policy. It's not a fight over spending. It's a fight over whether we actually believe in the Constitution anymore. Because our founding fathers did not ever envision we would have a king. They expected us to have a president, and they expected the president to recognize that Congress has the authority to make law. The president does not. That's what that battle is about. I have spoken on the floor of the House of Representatives at least a dozen times on this one single topic. We have a president, not a king. And this man acts like he is a king. That's why it's so important for us to say, Mr. President, you do not have the authority with a wave of your hand to legalize 5 million people without the consent of Congress. We approved the Keystone Pipeline again. 42,000 jobs, energy independence. It will continue to increase the supply of energy and oil, which will continue to drive down the price of gasoline when we go and pay for it at the pump. Passed the Regulatory Accountability Act, which is, once again, trying to rein in the power of the regulatory agencies. I tell people all the time, there's 5 pillars of power in Washington, D.C. The House, the Senate, the President, the media, which I'd love to talk about, but I argue the most important and the most powerful now are the regulatory agencies. If you don't like me, you can vote me out of Congress. Even with the president, worst case, he's gone in 8 years, those regulatory agencies are like your children. Once you have them forever, and they get more and more expensive. And that act helped to cut back some of that power. Finally, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly. Forbidden them from raiding the Social Security Trust Fund, and we hacked away at Obamacare with some of the rules and the things that he's implemented there. One of them I'm particularly proud of, which I was one of the original co-sponsors, was the HEROES Act, which allows them to waive Obamacare regulations to hire veterans, which is something we owe our veterans as a minimum to do that. Okay, wrapping this up quickly. It's a good start, but we still have a long, long way to go because the federal government is still too big, it's too invasive, and it's too powerful. So what else can we do? I have what I call my 12 and 12. Some of you heard me talk about this on some media and a couple other things. Gosh, I wish I had a little time to go through these. These are the things that I hope we can accomplish in the House and the Senate in the first 12 weeks. 12 bills, 12 weeks. Approved Keystone, we did that. Defunding executive amnesty, we've done that. I hope the Senate will have success in that. Thank heaven we've got people like Mike Lee, who's working for us in the Senate on those kinds of things. Repealing and replacing Obamacare. I've had the opportunity to vote 4 times to repeal and replace Obamacare entirely. We should. It's perhaps the most destructive law written in our history of our nation. It hurts families, it hurts businesses, it hurts the American worker. It needs to be repealed and replaced. Securing our country's borders. I was the vice chairman of the Border Security Subcommittee that wrote the bill that the House will take up in the next couple of weeks that actually secures our borders rather than doing as this administration has done, and that's pretend that our borders are secure. We had the secretary before our committee, and we asked her if the border was secure. Of course it is, she said. Of course, it's the most secure it's ever been. It's absolutely ridiculous that she would make that claim. Pulling in the REINS Act, again, which deals with the powers of these regulatory agencies. Substantial tax reform. I won't read through the list. You can see it. There's good things there that we hope to accomplish, and they're all possible. I want to end with this last one, which is my favorite, actually. This is my legislation. RAD Act. Where do you guys think that picture was taken? Maybe Iraq? Afghanistan? That's exactly right. You think those are military guys? They are not. They're National Park Service agents, by and large, with BLM agents. Why in the world does the Department of Education have a SWAT team? Why in the world does the Food and Drug Administration or the Agricultural Department, why do any of them have SWAT teams? There are some 72 of these agencies that have these type of paramilitary teams. It's insane that they have that kind of power. And we have regulation that would entirely defund these regulatory agencies and their radical, what we call the RAD Act, and take away their SWAT teams. And by the way, you talk to them, you say, oh, no, we don't have SWAT teams. Turns out they call them SET teams, which stands for something similar to, they name them slightly differently, but strategic or special event teams. Well, that's essentially the same thing. There's no reason, and it increases the distrust between the American people and the federal government. And once again, I just think it's insane that we've got these type of heavy-handed regulatory overreach that we see with these types of military, paramilitary units. All right, let me close with this if we could. Sometimes, as I said earlier, I wake up and I'm a little discouraged with what we're able to accomplish. But this is such a great time to be in the fight. What a blessing where all of us get to be in the fight when it really matters, when we can really make a difference. What we are engaged in can change the future path of our nation. I told you I'd open with Abraham Lincoln. I want to close with him as well. Before I do, this thought. The fight is not yet finished. As a friend of mine expressed to me yesterday or sometime this week, he said, there is only one person who can actually say it is finished. We are not that person. We stay in the fight as long as there are principles that we can fight for. Abraham Lincoln said, we are the last best hope on earth. That was true when he said it. It is still true today. It will be true when our children teach it to our grandchildren. We have so much to look forward to, but that is only true if we stay in the fight to preserve the heart and soul of this nation. God bless you for being here. God bless the United States of America. Thank you.